So you are listening to the Church Answers podcast. If you're on YouTube, you are watching the Church Answers podcast. Hey, Jess, I showed your eldest son you on a podcast, and he was so impressed.
I can only imagine.
He couldn't stop talking about it for days.
Days. Oh, 100%. Yeah. In fact, that's, at home when we watch TV as a family, we just go back and rewatch the podcasts that I'm on. I mean, that's how impactful it's been on my kids.
That's why you're shaping those two girls and that boy in such a way. Does your wife join you for that, or does she go somewhere else?
Everyone's in, even the dog. I mean, it's popcorn. We're in hot chocolate season, so it is. Every time these Church Answer podcasts release, we make it a family affair. I hope that's what our listeners do. I mean, I hope they bring the whole family in.
Oh,
I hope
yeah, the dogs, the cats, the possums, all of them.
Yeah. So that's what we do. I mean, so thank you for showing my son just what his dad does, because it has changed our family for the good.
Yes. And then he sits under your preaching every Sunday, and sometimes listens to it twice, but always once. So
yeah. Now I will say my son's awesome. He'll take notes during my sermons.
Yeah.
He'll come back and say, "Hey, Dad, here's what I learned. Did you know this?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I did." But I love it. He's an incredible kid. Absolutely.
So when I was preaching, how many notes did you take of my sermons?
0.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of adulation going one way, but not the other way. So we understand that totally. Mm-hmm. Well, Jess, what we're going to talk about something that is very common in church health vernacular, and it's growth barriers. And somebody says this, well, what can you say that's new? What can you say that hadn't been said under the sun? Right. We're going to tell you about that in just a moment. But first of all, thank you, Cheney & Associates, for being our sponsor. Hey, when I say that, that's a big deal, because they fund these podcasts. They've committed to fund another year. So 2025 is set with Cheney & Associates, and we're appreciative of them. We love what they're doing, and we just are grateful for everything that's happening with Cheney & Associates. And by the way, if you haven't heard me say this, they are the accounting firm for the church. Bookkeeping, taxes, whatever you need to have done, call Cheney and make an appointment with them, or go to CheneyAssociates.com. Have you met Steve Cheney yet, Jess?
Virtually. I don't think I've ever met him in person.
I need to get you. Wait a minute. I don't think I've ever met him in person either. I've had so many meetings with him, I was trying to remember, but I don't think I ever met him in person. They've all been virtual. Mm-hmm. So we're the same there. But we stay in communication a lot. Great firm, great organization, great ministry. Right. Okay. So I was saying at the beginning, you've heard about growth barriers for years and years. Experts, so-called experts, pundits were writing about growth barriers before you were born. Mm-hmm. Your dad was writing about them shortly after you were born. And so there is nothing new that we can say, okay, this is a new genre, this is a new topic. But there are things that are changing. And of course, when we talk about change, we're talking about methodological change. We're talking about application change. We're not talking about biblical change. Because if you start changing the Bible, you are not doing what you're supposed to do. And so this is all about some of the changes that are taking place in some of the common barriers. You and I talk a lot about church. Sometimes it's about church in general. Sometimes it's about our church, the church at Spring Hill. Right. And we have a lot of conversations in that, but I can guarantee you this. Many of the conversations that we are having were not the same conversations I was having with others when I was a pastor.
Yeah, I even ask you that. I'll say, did you face this? And I would say 4 out of 5 times you say no, that was not the challenge. But it's not to say that your challenges weren't real or my challenges are harder or anything like that. It's all contextual. The things you faced were different. I may not have responded well in your era, and who knows? You can't really discount it.
You would have, like for one of them that was a challenge in my era, but not in most of your peers' era, which is now, is 3 different sermons a week. I'm not talking about preaching 3 sermons. I'm talking about preaching 3. And basically what I did was I let up on the quality of 2 of them. Yeah. So one of them Sunday night could have been a rerun, could have been just something that I put together an hour or 2. Wednesday night was more of a Bible study, but they wanted it to be sermonic. So I had to do something there. And so the expectations of me were such that the quality went down. I'm sure there are a good few preachers out there that could preach 3 good different sermons a week, but I
Sure.
wasn't one of them.
Yeah, I don't think I could either. That would be difficult. And I would say the other two leaned probably more towards teaching, even though they were sermonic. It was probably more teaching than preaching.
Not Sunday night. Wednesday night was, but not Sunday night.
Okay, Sunday night they wanted another sermon. There's pros and cons to that.
I can't think of any pros right now unless you're
greater,
absolute incredible preacher.
Greater church involvement. More people came to church. You had people that were more active in your church versus just the Sunday morning. But yeah, that would be very difficult. And even now, you think about too the resources I have to sermon prep versus the resources you had. I mean, I have digital, print. I have everything. You had commentaries.
Yep.
That was
and I'd have to dig through the commentaries, and every now and then I would listen to tapes of pastors on sermon series just to give me some insights, like you might listen to or watch podcasts. But those were what I did. And here's the ironic thing: the greatest collection of tapes I had at any one time were the father of one of our church members.
Right.
So David Rogers is a member of a church at Spring Hill, a great member, and his father, Adrian Rogers, I used to listen to his sermons a lot.
Yeah. So that's the other thing is now my church members have way more access as well. So
that can be bad too.
They can be. It goes a lot of ways. So there's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. But when you pastored and when I pastor, you consistently face growth barriers. I think about it too, being a church plant, we started at our kitchen table with 2 of us, moved to our living room with 8 of us. And now we have our own building with many more of us. We have faced a lot of different growth barriers. And so as you were, preparing for this, as we were preparing for this and look at some of these, I was like, yep, I remember that one. Yep. I'm doing that one right now. I probably will be doing that one soon. So I've seen them, you've seen them. Even though we're from different eras, they are real. They are very, very real.
And what I love doing is I love being a church member in a church where you're the pastor, and I don't evaluate you. I don't really think of it that way, but I get to see what's going on in the church worship service, in the organization of a church. And I'm able in my mind to say, now this is a lot different than what I went through. If I had to trade eras, I probably would. I would probably like everything I'm seeing in your era. Maybe if I experienced it, I wouldn't, but I probably would. One thing would be the 3 sermons, the different sermons a week, which was a challenge. Another one was that pastoral care was always expected to be in person. Now it can be more digital. And then another one just would simply be the fact that, man, I can have a little more freedom, I guess is the word, in a church today, at least in most churches, than I did when I was a pastor. In fact, I had someone that monitored my office hours.
That's just bad.
It is bad. And what he would do, I can still remember his name, he would show up in the parking lot before work was supposed to begin, which was 8:00. And he wanted to make sure I was there already. Because sometimes when I pulled up at 8:15, he would just look at me and then he would pull out. And then he was there at 5-ish to make sure that I was still there. He did that about twice a week, my entire ministry.
That's bad.
That
has nothing to do with eras. I don't care what era that is.
Oh,
there's a lot of wrong with that.
Yeah. There is. So I didn't play golf, so I didn't have to go out there, but I had to do a lot of hospital calls. So hospital ministry was ubiquitous in my era. Even if you had a younger church, you were expected to go to relatives and you would go into the hospital room because what today is outpatient surgery was 3 days back then.
Yeah. And now it's almost not, I don't say it's not welcomed, but
I think the expectation.
I mean, the COVID changed a lot. The expectation to be in the hospital is very, very little now.
Yeah.
And the hospital doesn't really want you in there.
Right. Unless it's a very serious thing where they think they need ministry of some sort. So let's go over some of these points we're going to have. We're going to put them on the lower third so you'll be able to see them. Evangelistic apathy is our first point. Now, this is not new.
Right.
But what I would say about it is today it is the first thing about evangelistic apathy is to create an awareness that we need to be evangelistic. And what I'm saying is in my era, I did not have to go to the perceived need first.
Mm-hmm.
My church members knew that people needed Christ to be saved. I wouldn't say they necessarily had an urgency, all of them, but they had an awareness to that was there.
Right.
Today, you go into a church, I don't even know well, I should say I do know because I do a lot of consultations. It's not first on their minds of most church members. So you as a pastor not only have to lead in evangelism, you have to lead in the need for evangelism, which is significantly different.
Yeah, you have to teach it.
Yeah.
You teach the need for it, and that, you've heard us at the end of every worship service for the last, I don't know how many years, 4 or 5. I need to go figure out how long it's been. We recite. Hopefully, at this point, it's reciting the same verse.
I still peek and look at it.
The same verse every single week, and it's the idea. It's from Matthew 9 that people that are distressed and dejected like sheep without a shepherd. So pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. Long story short, it's the idea. We send our people out every single week with a reminder of like, there are people who need Jesus. Mm-hmm. They need this hope that we have. That's omitted from a lot of churches now. It's easy, and I don't want to say it's easy, but it can be easy just to let that slide. And a lot of churches don't choose to make that a focus, and that starts creating growth barriers. You did mention, though, you did say, I think you said something like maybe this is one that's a little bit easier to cover up of some sort, or maybe I read that in the notes. The idea that transfer growth mm-hmm. can be one that can cover this up a lot easier.
You can disguise that you're not being evangelistic by transfer growth. That was more common in my day than it is now. Okay.
Right. Transfer growth is a lot less.
Yes.
These days. Now, I would say, different populations, Nashville, Tennessee is our area. We do have to fight against transfer growth, because we got a lot of people moving from California up north. And so it is
New York State.
It's a little bit different. It's not quite, in community transfer growth, but it is transfer growth.
Yep.
At its core, it's not evangelistic growth.
Yeah, and Sam, when he did his typology of this, your brother Sam, he referred to the kind where people are coming in from another community as demographic growth, and then mm-hmm. when they're transferring from one church to another in the community, he called it transfer growth. And he said demographic growth is okay. These people need a good church home. So
question for you then: why is evangelistic apathy a barrier to growth? I'm more on the apathy. Is it this idea of like, you can still grow without it. So what is it about this particular one, besides the obvious, right? You don't reach people for Christ, baptisms, but what's specific about this one makes it a barrier for growth?
Well, the first maybe obvious thing is that it's spiritual warfare. And I don't really think that Satan worries that much about transfer growth. Maybe if someone needs to become a more ready disciple for Christ, but most of the time, let them transfer from one church to another. But if you're out battling for the kingdom, he'll use any tactic that is in his toolbox, and apathy is one of them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can disguise it with transfer growth, but the reality of it is most of our churches today don't even have that. They don't even have the disguise that is available.
Yeah. To kind of build on that, I think too, you mentioned in your era, you didn't have to teach about it. It was just people knew that people needed Jesus. I think that most Christians still know that. I don't think that's necessarily gone. I think there's just way more fear now. There's the cancel culture we live in, this idea of like, you can be ostracized, you can be shunned. As cultural Christianity has died, so has what has risen is the fear mm-hmm. of evangelism. So maybe it's not apathy. I don't know. Now that we're talking through this, maybe more of it's evangelistic fear. People are just afraid to step on toes. They're afraid of what people think. They're afraid of that visceral response that very rarely ever happens. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of churches maybe and church members are kind of like, I don't want to do that. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. From my perspective, fear that lasts any length of time turns to apathy. It becomes our cover. Okay. And so we stop thinking about it because we don't want to. So we put it in another category and we move on.
So how do you overcome this one?
Number 2.
Wait, the second barrier that we're going to cover is the way to overcome the first barrier?
Well, the second barrier, prayer drought, is a barrier in itself.
Okay.
But I have worked with, particularly with Chuck Lawless, studying churches that have effective, sustained evangelistic growth. And the data is so clear. We know biblically it is clear, but the data is so clear. Churches that are praying for evangelism, praying for people who are not Christians, maybe not by name, but specifically praying for them. Churches that have not just a prayer emphasis, but a prayer emphasis to reach people with the gospel regularly. Those are the churches that are reaching more people for Christ. There's a high correlation between the two. I found this out in my first research project that I did called Effective Evangelistic Churches, a book, I think 1996, if I remember correctly. And that it was just so confirming. It's not just prayer, it's evangelistic prayer. And there's a prayer drought there for sure.
Yeah. There's something to that. I'm kind of curious here. Do you know any churches that do prayer for salvations, prayer for evangelistic efforts well? Because I'm looking in the mirror. For me, I don't feel like we do this great. I think we do. I know we have through our prayer team. We have a prayer team. We have prayer requests every single week. There's always requests for salvation on that.
Yeah,
but that's not something we're doing intentionally beyond a few things. But do you know any churches that actually do this well, that pray
I do,
for salvation?
but you caught me off guard because I have a list of them that actually came through the study, and it's in the back of the book, and I can remember some of them from the list of the churches, but that's old information. I will say that I believe it was Chuck Lawless. No, it was Jonathan Howe and I. Jonathan Howe and I went to do a consultation in Arkansas. That's all I can remember about the church in Arkansas. And it can't be that long ago because I just met Jonathan a decade ago, so it's not that old of information. And I was to preach, and I got there, and I realized that it was their mission week, but I didn't have a sermon prepared. So Jonathan gave me the back of a welcome card, and I tried to, put some key points down, and I preached it. But the thing about that church was that church had been in 24/7 prayer. I may have the years wrong, but about 9 years without stopping.
They would praying for 9 years straight, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yes, they hadn't missed it. I believe it was 9 years.
Wow.
Needless to say, explosive evangelistic growth. They had gotten to the point where their greatest fear was fearing not to pray because they would see what would happen when the prayer shield would go down. I wish I could remember that church. I have mentioned it in long ago podcast, but I gave you one. That was just one example. But that's an extreme example.
Some of the things too when we do these podcasts, me being a local church pastor, it kind of puts some ideas in my head to where that maybe we as a not huge church, not small church, I don't know what.
Well, it's in the top 15%.
Whatever that means. Long story short is we have some, but not abundant of resources. What can we do? Because we do. I mean, I think the Church of Spring Hill we're facing a growth barrier right now. We're facing another growth barrier that it's been harder to push through as of recent. And this has kind of put some things in my mind of like how can we begin to pray for salvations? How can we pray for the community?
Go through a season. This is your consultant talking to you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do it because I'm going to show up on Sundays.
Yeah.
Go through a season where you're taking your Matthew 9 passage and say for the next month or 2 months, we want us to have an awareness that they're lost people. And so we're going to use this passage as our own prayer. I want you to just take it as your own prayer to reach people with the gospel. That way you'll always have it. You'll be a part of it. And, it may be something that you don't hold on to forever, though I like Matthew 9 indefinitely. But you can say, this is why we're praying for this. There are people who don't know Christ in the community. So would you take time to do that during this?
Yeah. And I don't know if this, I'm just shooting from the hip here. We could even, maybe your church, you're listening to this, like here's an idea that just popped in my head is you could create some kind of card that people put in their Bibles. Mm-hmm. And then maybe at the end of the service, when we read our verse, this sounds cheesy. I don't know if I would actually do this, but they're holding their card, or during our prayer time, they
Mhm.
pull that. That's probably better. During our prayer time, they actually pull that card and they pray for those people. So
Mhm.
little things like that can begin to spark this idea of getting out of the prayer drought, which is a lot of churches are in, but also overcoming this evangelistic apathy, doing something very practical. That in itself could be a catalyst for growth.
It could be, or at least could be the removal of a barrier that will allow the supernatural growth to take place. Same thing, just in a different way. So yeah, I think those are possibilities. Hey, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, share with others. If you're listening to us on audio podcasts, give us a rating and review. But would you think about doing this? We don't get a lot of comments on our podcast. It's kind of not designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
But if you would think about giving us some ideas of what your church is doing as we go through these barriers, I'd love to hear from you pastors and others. Just shoot. We have comments that can be made at either place on YouTube or on your podcasting app. I think for the podcasting app, I think you have to actually go to our site where the show notes are. But you can do that, and
Yeah.
we'd love to hear from you.
The other thing too, and I'm just thinking of things we have done in the past. We have done the Hope Initiative at the Church at Spring Hill, which is something that we have at Church Answers here. It combines both prayer and evangelism, and so that could be something that a churches can do as well. That's something that's just ready to go. Go pick it up, go purchase it.
Yeah, and you can go. We'll put a link at Church Answers for the resource. Very inexpensive. You get a book to go with it called "Pray and Go," and you pray and then you go.
Yeah, I just I'm just thinking too. If you're a church leader, you're listening to this. I know this podcast is supposed to come out before the end of the year, 2024. If you're thinking like, how do I kick off 2025? What if you began by praying for the lost people in your community and what that would do in your church?
It'd be great.
2 months, 3 months. There's your kickoff for the new year. I think we'd see maybe not instant growth, but I think there would be a culture shift that would ultimately lead
Culture
to
shift would be it. It'd be a
long-term growth.
supernatural culture shift.
Yeah.
And just as one example, that is exactly what the Global Methodist Church in North Carolina is doing with us. They're taking 10% of their entire church numbers of churches.
Okay.
They have over 400 churches. They're going to do 41 with us. And so we are going to take them not only through the Pray and Go and through the Hope Initiative, we're going to take them through a lot of other things, but the impetus is all on the Hope Initiative. That's where we're going to be in. That's an entire regional denomination that's doing it, and they're saying that's our wake-up call. Mm-hmm. Relatively new one. Hey, we better get to some of these others because now we're going to talk about you.
What? Hold on, you just put me in this third barrier?
Well, I thought about you in it. I didn't just put you there.
Okay. All right.
Your Church of Spring Hill has a staffing lead.
We do. And you're right.
And you're the only full-time person there, and the rest of them are very part-time. I mean, it's not like you have three-quarter timers or anything like that. You have a very part-time staff. Your budget is very healthy. I mean, it's great. But you made a decision, rightfully so, early because there was not going to be much opportunity to get real estate to go in and take care of the facility issue on the front end. And in any budget, when you pay more for facility, you have less for personnel.
Yep.
And that's it. Your leader, you are this little cog on a funnel. And, it's all trying to come through you, and it just gets clogged from time to time. I know I'm sounding critical, but you and I have had these same conversations.
Yeah, no, we made a strategic decision early on in the life of the Church of Spring Hill to invest in facilities because of the very quickly rising property values of where we are. We made a long-term decision to invest, and it has been the right decision. God gave a ton of wisdom early on for that, and I'm so thankful for that. And God opened up many pathways. So we're very blessed as a church plant, as a young church, to have the facilities that we do. The community needed it, but it did create a barrier for us. It's a staffing lid, and you're right. I'm the only full time. I have 5 part-time staff as well. So they all do very specific, individualized roles, and so they are. Most of them are co-vocational. And so we do have a staffing lid. And so we've created, there's a natural bottleneck that exists in a church our size, because it's being the only full-time staff. People automatically just assume I need to go to Jess.
Jess, we need to get some toilet tissue in here.
Yes. And so what the Church of Spring Hill has done, and what we've begun to do, and what we are still doing, is dispersing the leadership. And so we've had to create a lot more volunteer leadership positions. And so I'm creating a very wide organizational chart, org chart, but it's because people need to know who to go to for certain things. I'm not the toilet paper guy.
And it's not beneath you, but you just can't do everything.
I can't. You talk about, if I had to prep 3 sermons, there's no way. But it also too, it's biblical. I mean, it's equipping the saints to do the work of ministry. So if I were trying to do it all, that's a problem. But it is, and so I'm trying not to be the bottleneck anymore, because it's a growth barrier for us. There's a staffing lid, and I'm trying to create more and more opportunities for leaders to step up. In fact, I can't remember the last time I've told someone no at the Church of Spring Hill.
Wow.
I've said yes, but you have to go do it.
Yes.
So we have more ministry happening than we've ever had before, because more and more people are choosing to step up. And so what that's happening, it's slowly getting rid of the lid or the bottleneck. The bottleneck is getting wider and wider and wider. And so the hope is, as we grow, that the bottleneck is going to ultimately open up a little bit more additional funding. We don't hire full-time staff, and then that next step happens. But I think if you're looking at this and you're thinking, yeah, I need to do that, there's a couple ways. If I can just jump in and maybe give a couple ideas. Find part-time staff, and you mentioned I have some that are 5 hours a week, right? Does it cost? Yes, but nothing near 3/4 time, full time. That way you get someone very specialized in an individual role that they can focus in on, and they can execute well. Each of my part-time staff, they have one specific task. Well, I have one that's double task, but beyond that, they have one specific task. Do this thing and do it well. That begins to create less of a bottleneck through me. I think it's a good solution. Another thing is just be more intentional about leadership development with volunteers. And this is hard. It's a lot of work, but if you can begin to develop a few leaders and help them lead others, and I'm beginning to tell my leaders a lot more, hey, I want you to be an equipper, not a doer. And I want you to be an equipper, not a doer. I need you to help other people do the work. And so those are 2 things that I've been working on to get over this.
And I'll add a third that Church Answers has contributed, a ministry called My Church Staff. And basically, we are the mentors to the volunteer that you find, or we can help you find the volunteer if you don't know what you're looking for. We've got 3 staff areas, if you will, and it's $100 a month, so it's not expensive. It's very affordable. We got worship leader, we've got the stewardship leader, and we've got the welcome ministry leader. I was trying to think what Danny Franks calls his. It's not hospitality, it's not worship. I got guest services ministry.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
we've got those, and we'll be growing it from this point on. Been a great launch of it. So those are 3 ways. My
church staff is a great way to begin to also grow your church and have additional staff. I'll add just one more practical thing if I can.
Yeah.
If you're a church leader, you're a pastor, and you're listening to this, you're trying to figure out well, how do I know if I'm the bottleneck? Take 30 minutes and do your best. Write down everything you do in a given week. Every little thing.
My guess is you don't have you can't do it in 30. You can't do it in 30 minutes.
An hour, however long it is.
I'm
talking I get it. If you're a lead pastor, and sometimes you go and you change the paper towels in the bathroom, write it down. Write down every little potential thing that you do, and then look at that list and go, what are 3 things that I can give away to a volunteer?
Hey, and for many years, your wife was the custodial crew.
She was our cleaning team, and now we're blessed. We actually have that's outsourced. We found a cleaning company from the outside, but yeah, that was one I had to figure out a solution pretty quickly.
Yep. Let's talk about this next one.
Yeah.
Unvalued bride. I'm speaking of the bride of Christ. I'm speaking of the church.
Mm,
And I'm speaking of the fact that many people, even let's say particularly churchgoers, do not understand biblically how important the local church is. You start from Acts 2, you go all the way to Revelation 3. It's either about the local church, it is either to the local church, or it is in the context of the local church. Every word within there, if it was that important to God to establish the local church with Christ as the groom and the church as the bride, then how much more should it be to us? And we talk
right.
about attendance frequency and people who come up with every reason under the sun not to come to church. Worship services is particularly what I'm saying. And that shouldn't be. It should be one of the most valued things that we do. As I'm recording this, I was not really that sick last Sunday, but I was coughing a lot, and I knew that some people would come and kick me out of the service because I couldn't stop coughing.
I don't think we do that, but okay.
No, I'm just saying. That's tongue in cheek, just talking about people would not want me going during the whole
Sure.
service and
Sure.
spreading germs. So I made the decision to stay, and I did listen and watch the service. And you weren't preaching, but I still stayed with it anyway. And I missed being there.
Hmm.
I miss being in my community group. I miss being in the worship service. I miss being around these people, even though everybody's so freaking much younger than I am. I miss being there.
Uh-huh.
I love the bride of Christ.
And can you pinpoint why? I think I know the answer. At least I'm going to hope I know the answer. Can you pinpoint why?
Well, they're two flashpoints, so I'm going to have to see which one it is.
Okay.
Flashpoint number one was when I went from going to unchurched to churched. And that was right before the birth of your oldest brother.
Okay. Okay.
So I fell in love with the church because I had a comparison of no church. And so when I did that, I fell in love. I know that's the phone. Uh, okay, to all the podcasting office audience, I think this is a spam call, so I'm not going to answer. It rang right over the microphone, so I'm just going to keep it right here. You can see the number there. So I usually take the phone off the hook. I'm sorry. Sorry to the audience. Yeah, it says spam.
That's a new one. Okay. So I was asked the question, let me bring it back in
The
time.
other point was my writing. I'm a church member.
Well, I'm saying specifically, why did you miss coming this past Sunday?
Well, I love the fellowship. I love my community group.
Uh-huh.
I love listening to the preach word. I don't know.
I think, and this is too, if you're talking about a barrier, is that there is an unvalued bride in the local church.
Yeah.
I think what has happened recently in the Church of Spring Hill, and maybe this could work for other churches. I hope it works for every church. Is hunger.
Yeah.
So hunger produces hunger. Appetite produces appetite. Desire produces desire. When you are truly working in a community of believers that are hungry for God, it's contagious. Like when you worship, when you're around people who are just worshiping,
yeah,
it creates an appetite for worship. When you have people who are excited to serve, and you get to be a part of that, it's contagious. And so when you put that in the framework of who we're God's royal nation. We are His chosen people. We're His nation, was a royal priesthood. When we are, God's sons and daughters, when you begin to say, "Hey, we are family, and we belong to God, and we're coming together for Him," it's contagious. And so, to me, I know we've mentioned this before. Going back to evangelism, I think this is another major culture piece to overcome barriers. I think some of these that we're talking about today, there's practicality behind it. There's the staffing lid, but other things, these are culture pieces. And so if you have a church that does not value the bride, that does not value the local church, they're probably missing the hunger of being together, of worshiping together.
And now that you say that, in more context than I can remember, when people talk about my little book that you told me to make it a little book called I Am a Church Member, that is what they said. I was reminded of how valued the church is, and I had taken it for granted.
Yep. So I think that starts with the top leadership. If you're looking at this local church, how hungry are you? I read a book at the beginning of last year. I think I've mentioned this before, but it was good for me. It's The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. And it's just getting back to that hunger. So if that's you, maybe it's just reading a book. Maybe it's, doing a mini retreat before the end of the year, start off the year. Like, where's your hunger? Where's your desire? How much do you value the bride of Christ? And as you become more hungry in worship, as you become hungry for the word. In fact, I pray that. I don't know if you picked up on that. I typically pray that right before we go into God's word, is that people would generally be hungry for what God has to say. I think when you can begin to do that, this isn't a switch you flip. This is a dial you turn. Then people begin to value the bride more.
I love that.
Sorry, I got preachy there.
That's a good sermon. Unit decline. What I mean by unit decline is most healthy churches are increasing the number of units they have. Classes, Sunday school, community groups, sometimes campuses. New units engender growth. It's just the newness of them. And that was the secret to the growth of the Sunday school movement from roughly 1890 to about 1965, 1970. It was, Sunday school was big, but it was always increasing groups or having an awareness to increase groups. So when you would look at a church that had grown, you would look at their small groups or you would look at their Sunday school classes and you would say, oh, this is the instrument that God used. Basically, you were taking off a lid when you were doing that. You're creating new space. In fact, Southern Baptist, that denomination, even had an entire cycle that they built around it. And sometimes it was called Flake's Formula, and other times it was called the Growth Spiral, but it was built around increasing units. You have been really pushing that at the Church of Spring Hill, not only for people to get involved in a community group, but to create new groups. And you've seen several created off of your group as well.
Yeah. And this does go back to a little bit of the staffing lid. Is because people are like, well, yeah, I'd love to create new groups, but it takes time. It takes energy. It takes, I would recommend if you're a local church leader, find 5 or 6, and this goes back to leadership development. Train them to lead a small group. There's a great book, Kevin Mills.
Oh, let's put that in the show notes.
Yeah. It was the title, How to Lead a Healthy Small Group, I believe is the title.
Our group, one of the two.
How to lead a
Kevin
group.
Mills is the author.
Yeah. And I know we have training that goes along with it as well at Church Answers. That's a great book. You can use that. You don't have to create it. You just got to lead people through it. And so we have a resource already available that you can take and use that to launch new groups. Start it off first quarter, lead them through it. Second quarter, launch 3 new groups, 4 new groups. You're taking away the apathy. You're taking away the lid. You're developing new leaders, and you're reversing the unit decline.
You're solving all these problems.
This one, it's not a silver bullet, but this one you can do a lot more. It's a lot more practical, I think, and it can happen fast.
Yeah. That is good, but most churches don't think about unit decline. They may think about getting your people involved in a group. A few of them may, but do they really think about, and the more of these we have, the more opportunities we're going to have? Yeah. Kind of a new thing that's really an old thing. Forgotten pathways. And what I mean by pathways as a growth barrier is our church members need to visualize how they're going to grow in Christ in the context of the local church. Outside the local church, get in the word, share the gospel, be a man or woman of prayer. Inside the local church, here's some things that we would like all of our church members to do. And I know that you think about those things as well, and you articulate them frequently.
Ish. This is one of, we talk about some of the growth barriers, the staffing lid, the forgotten pathways. These are probably my top 2. I think we do have some evangelistic apathy as well, but not as much. I think those are my top 2. So I actually disagree. This is one I don't think we've done as well at the church at Spring Hill, and that's actually something I'm course correcting for next year.
Okay.
We're gonna speak. Our vision statement is we talk about a lot. We exist because everyone needs the hope of Jesus. We don't talk about the pathway as much. In fact, we're gonna be, hopefully by the time this is out, don't want to My church doesn't know it yet, but they're getting ready to know it.
The release date is December 12th.
Okay, so if any of my directors hear this, this is before our final director meeting of the year. We have a final director meeting on the 18th. So if they catch this 4 days ahead, 6 days ahead, whatever it was, then they're going to be. But we're actually going to be shifting our mission and values, something that is way more practical that people can hold on to a lot easier. In fact, our verbiage is going to change. We've been talking about belong, giving, thriving, loving. It doesn't communicate well. And so we're changing it, and we haven't finalized it, so I'm not necessarily going to put it out there yet. But we're making it more church family centric, and making it more accessible in our language. For example, I don't know if this is the exact language. We're a church family that consistently worships together. And so we're going to develop that out. There's going to be more pieces to it. But it's this idea of just making language accessible that people know what their expectation is. I mean, it goes back to expectations. And there's a good chance if you're a church leader out there, you probably already have something like this. Worship, grow, go. Usually it just comes down to, is it memorable? Not, I think we got to get away from pithy with this. Is it accessible?
Yeah.
Is it accessible, and do you communicate it well, and do you communicate it often?
I like memorable as part of it too.
Yeah, the creative pithy, I've kind of steered away from that as much. But I think, though, if you want to get over this growth barrier, maybe this is one that your church is facing, you've got to make it accessible and memorable for people, that they know what the expectation is of, like, what does it mean to be a part of this, our church family, this church family? What does it mean to be a part of it? What are the expectations? And that can be communicated for everyone. Obviously, you have your membership. They're going to have a little bit higher expectation, but even someone who's an attender, this is, if you want to come, this is what we want. Mm-hmm. This is what we're looking for. This is what it means to be a part of this church family. And you can take that forgotten pathway and make it a known pathway.
I like it. The last one on here is community amnesia. And that is basically, most people who are part of a church, even the most active ones, and oftentimes even the pastor, don't really know who's in the community and what the composition of the community is. And so you can't always reach your community if you don't know your community. Mm-hmm. What we're going to do, Jess, is we're just going to leave it there hanging, and we're going to open this up in the next episode, where we're going to actually work with church leaders, and we're going to walk with them step by step how they can know their community so that they can be more effective praying for their community, mm-hmm. and reaching the community. And here's the little segue I'm going to say. I have never worked with a pastor, never, who didn't find some surprise when they went through this process, right. Ever. So get ready for that. We'll get ready for the next episode. Thanks for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. Thank you, as always, Cheney & Associates, for being the accounting firm for the church. And we've already given you a hint. Be here next week if you're listening to this the week of the release, or whatever time you decide to listen to it. And the release will be December 19th. So this release of this one was December 12th, 1 week from today, if you get the release date. Thank you, as always, for being a part of the Church Answers podcast. Get ready for a fun one in the next episode.